Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ninth episode of this series. In this series, we'll be going over a basic Java tutorial for an introduction to Java course. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to watch all the other videos in the series. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel as well, as I'll be pushing more content out. This series is coming to a close as just a basic introduction, and then we'll go ahead and could start a new series soon regarding math or some other academic topic. But for now, let's get into this lesson, which is going to be about for loops and logic continued. So let's go ahead and recap from the last lesson. So in the last lesson, we learned more about logic and we also started to explore for loops as well. So keep in mind, you'd want to use a for loop when you know how many times you're going to be doing a loop. So like if let's say you want to print out system.out.println hello world 100 times. So you already know how many times you're going to do it. I'd strongly suggest you use a for loop. So let's go ahead and make a for loop that will print out all the numbers from 1 to 100. And if you haven't already, make sure you refer to the last video so that this video will make a little bit more sense. So let's go ahead and do this. So if you recall, what this loop does is that initially you have a for loop and you're doing this line of code for so many times. So essentially what you're doing is saying, let's declare a variable I and start it at 1. And this line of code tells you how many times you're going to run this loop, and this tells you how you're going to increment it. So you have your variable I is 1, then it's going to see if I is less than 101. And if so, it'll continue. So then it'll look inside this statement and execute this line of code, and then it'll print out I. Then it'll go back to the start of the for loop, and then it'll basically just compare, okay, what the current value of I is. If it's less than that, then it'll increment by 1. So that's how it will work. And it'll keep on doing so until this condition is false. And that's when the loop terminates. So let's go ahead and run this. So as you can see here, it prints all the numbers from 1 to 100. Now, what if I wanted to print every even number? So then from there, I go ahead and say if I mod 2 equals 0, then we'll just print this like that. So essentially what this is doing is we're basically saying we're going to run this loop 100 times. And then for every value of I, we're going to divide that by 2 and check the remainder. If the remainder is like, if there is no remainder, then we won't, then we're going to print it out because we're looking for even numbers. If there is a remainder, we won't print it out. As you can see here, it prints out every even number. Now, let's go ahead and do this for odd numbers. Can you guys go ahead and try and tell me how to do this for odd numbers, to print out every odd number? Well, now that you come back, there's two solutions. The first is that you can do a bang exclamation mark and an equal sign. This will basically check to see if it's not going to be equal to 0. And in this case, if your number is not even, then it must be odd. So that's why you can use this type of logic. Or you can directly say this should be equal to 1. And then from there, you can just do it like this. Okay, so run it on your own, and this should print out a list of odd numbers. Now, what if I want to print out all the numbers from 1 to 100 divisible by 6, but not by 9? Go ahead and try this out on your own. So print all the numbers from 1 to 100 divisible by 6 but not by 9. So first, we're going to be using the variable I to represent all the numbers from 1 to 100, and we go in a loop. We've done so in these lines of code, as you've already been explained before. Now, in line 9, this is where if statement comes into play. We're essentially going to print a number out if it is divisible by 6 but not by 9. How do we check to see if it's divisible by 6? Well, first, we have to check to see if it's divisible by 6 by making sure that when we divide the number by 6, there's no remainder. So essentially, I mod 6 must equal 0. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we have to check to see, to make sure when we divide the number by 9, the remainder, when we divide the number by 9, it must not equal to 0, because the number must be divisible by 6, but not by 9. So for example, I don't know, let's say 24 would work, but 36 wouldn't. So we have to say I mod 9 is not equal to 0. And for some reason, this throws an error. Undefined for, okay, what this is right, as you can see here, it just compiled. So as you can see here, it prints 6, 12, it skips 18, and it skips 36, and it skips 54, and so forth from 1 to 100. Now, next thing I want you guys to do, I want you guys to print all the numbers from 1 to 100 in descending order. Go ahead and give that a shot and tell me what you guys think. So now that you guys have given it a shot, all we have to do is, instead of counting from 1 up, we count from 100 and down. So let's say int I is equal to 100. While I is greater than 0, instead of counting up, we count down. So instead of saying I plus plus, we say I minus minus, which means decrement by 1. So this case, we stop that. I meant to say I is greater than 0, not greater than 100. So let's try that again. As you can see, we start from 100 and we count all the way down to 1. That's perfect. Now, one thing I wanted to try and teach you guys is how to use nested for loops. Now, this is a bit of a tricky subject, so bear with me. So let's go ahead and do 18i and 18ii. So I want to write a program to print the following. I want to print these lines of stars. Let's just do the first two for now in this video, and we'll do the third one is a warm-up and letter video. So how do I print these lines of stars? Well, whenever you're dealing with nested for loops, my advice is to always look for a relationship between the rows and the columns of something. More times often than not, when you're dealing with nested for loops, you're tending to work with a relationship of some sort that can be exploited and applied to all cases. So let's go ahead and try and sort this out ourselves. So as you can see here, we have for loop. We have a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Now we have 10 columns and 4 rows, so 4 by 10, right? So let's go ahead and try and code this output. So I'm gonna, okay, so let's start. So we can obviously do this. We know that each row has 10 stars in it, so we can just write a for loop to print each row 4 times. We can do it as this. While int I is 0, I is less than 3, we just say I plus plus. Then we just do system.out.print print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we should run this. And we get this result as expected. Oh, let's say less than 4. Okay, give me a sec. And we get the result as expected. But if you notice about something, it seems rather inefficient. Look at this. We repeatedly type the star and the asterisk sign 4 different times. Or not 4 different, 10 different times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 different, that's a lot if you ask me. So how do we do this? How do we avoid this? If we can do any action that can be repeated, can be best visualized in the form of a loop. So let's go ahead and try and loop this. Now, how would you write a star 10 times? Imagine, forget the first for loop. Let's go ahead and try and create a for loop for this line over here. So we essentially just want to print out 1 star 10 times. How would we do that? Well, we do for int I is equal to 0, while I is less than 11, I plus plus. And we do system.out.print this. Let's run this. We're gonna comment this out for now. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, yeah, because I'm starting from 0, so I have to do this. Okay. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Okay, 10 stars. That works perfect. So notice how this line of code is basically equal to this line of code over here. So let me walk you through. We have a for loop. We say int I is equal to 0 and I is less than 10. So it's going to repeat this action 10 times, basically until the variable I is no longer less than 10 because you're counting up. And it's going to keep on printing the star. Now, this is the exact same thing as this print statement does. So we can just theoretically substitute this chunk of code for this chunk of code over here. So let me go ahead and do that. There. Format this real quick. All right, so as you can see here, the only thing is that we have to change the variable because I is already being used over here. And it says already here you have a duplicate variable. So instead of calling it I, let's just call it like J or something. I don't know, beats me. Call it a different variable. And it's the same thing. You're going to print out the same thing 10 times. Now, the only thing is that we don't, once we print this out 10 times, as you can see here on the compiler screen, we're not going to a new line. We have to go to a new line once we're done with this line of code because we did system.out.print, not system.out.println. So we need to add the new line ourselves after this statement is done executing. Keep in mind, it's the same thing as doing system.out.print and then 10 stars. So we can just honestly go ahead and add system.out.println. And effectively, you're just adding a new line at the end of it. So when you run it, you'll be doing the same thing, except it's in a much better format. Hopefully you guys understand this. So if you go back to here, we're going to be doing example number 2, which is basically to create a inverted or proper triangle of some sort. So just give me a sec. Yes. So how do we create this triangle? Well, this triangle is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. And for every row, there's that many stars. So the first row is 1 star, second row is 2 stars, third row is 3 stars, fourth row is 4 stars, fifth row is 5 stars. So basically we can say for int I is less than 5, we're going to do something 5 times, which means we're going to print stars for 5 rows. And how many rows stars we're going to print? In each row, we're going to print whatever row we're on, that many stars. So let's go ahead and start this. So int I0, well, let's not say I, let's say rows to make this more clear. Rows is less than 5, and then rows plus plus. Then let's get rid of this. Now, we need to print a star. And we print a star depending on the amount of, depending on what row we are. So for simplicity, we're saying 1 and then less than equal to 5. So if we're on row 1, we'll print 1 star and so forth. So let's go ahead and write a for loop saying for int j equals 0. And while j, let's just say not j, stars. And while stars is less than rows, stars plus plus plus. So essentially what this does is that you're starting the amount of stars on each row at the number 0. And while stars is less than row, you'll increment the amount of stars. So the first row, you'll have what? I believe it'll be something like 1 star. Second row, 2 stars. Third row, 3 stars, something like that. Now, hopefully this works. I'm just going to print this. And then outside the for loop, we're going to print a new line. See, so this works perfectly over here. So that is mainly it for the lesson today. We just talked about nested for loops and some logic. Next lesson, we'll be going more into while loops. Now, I strongly try and urge you guys to do number 3. When you do number 3, make sure you account for spaces, because you're no longer printing star first. You're printing the space. So you're printing 4 spaces, then a star, 3 spaces, then a star, 2 spaces, then a star, 1 space, and a star, and then all stars. So you might have to have 2 different for loops inside your big for loop to account for that. One for loop dealing with spaces, another for loop dealing with stars. Now, this was it for today's lesson. Please watch the other videos if you've enjoyed, and thank you so much, and take care. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.